Tide for Sarah Swanson.
It's going to be white.
There you go.
It's light work, period.
Roll Tide and welcome to Tide TV This Week. I'm Roger Hoover, joined by Kira Goldstein. It continues to be really busy here at Alabama.
Yeah, a bunch of Alabama teams keep picking up wins, including the Alabama men's basketball team.
Yeah, Alabama picked up their second win in a row when the Crimson Tide defeated one of the hottest teams in the SEC, the 19-5 Arkansas Razorbacks.
The Razorbacks had won 9 straight heading into Saturday's matchup with the Tide in Coleman Coliseum, including defeating number 1 Auburn earlier in the week. The Razorbacks jumped out to a quick 5-0 lead, but the Tide responded. A three-pointer from Keon Ellis jump-started a 12-9 run for the Tide to take a 21-14 lead. During that run, the Tide was hot from beyond the arc, knocking down 5 of 10 shots. The Razorbacks responded with a 9-0 run to close the gap to 1, but the Tide extended their lead back to 5 at 37-32 at the half.
Alabama came out hard to start the second half with a 6-1 run to take their first double-digit lead of the game at 43-33. The Tide extended their lead to 13 before the Razorbacks used an 18-4 run to take their first lead of the second half at 65-64 with a minute 43 to play on this three-pointer by the SEC's leading scorer, J.D. Notae. Noah Gurley gave Alabama the lead back at 66-65, and then after Arkansas retook the lead with a couple of free throws from Notae, it was Noah Gurley again. This basket gave Alabama the lead once again at 68-67. Razorbacks had one last shot at the buzzer, but it would not fall as Alabama hung on to defeat the red-hot Razorbacks by 1, 68-67.
The guys showed a lot of resolve. We got down after being up 13, and Noah scored 2 go-ahead buckets. Noah was huge for us late in the game. He didn't shoot the three particularly well tonight, but he did a great job finishing at the rim. He played really hard. I'm really happy for him.
J.D. Davison led Alabama in scoring for the first time in his career, finishing with 11 points, 4 assists, 4 rebounds, a steal, and a block. For his performance, Davison was named the SEC Freshman of the Week. That win put the Crimson Tide back in the top 25. The Associated Press has Alabama ranked 25th in this week's poll.
Yeah, very impressive for the Tide. Before we move on to the midweek matchup against Mississippi State, let's take an all-access look back at the Tide's big 68-67 win over the Razorbacks.
Team in the SEC, the Hogs, have won 9 straight. They take on an Alabama team that can beat anybody.
Time to make our run. We started at Ole Miss. Let's keep it going.
Who's going to go to board on Monday?
Locking on D, offense going to take care of itself. I feel good. Have fun. Hey, go there, have fun, y'all. Come on, let's go.
That's alone. 3. He does. Jake Shackelford takes advantage. Inbounds, Rojas, 3-5, left alone, and he buried it. Boy, when they dare us, you got to deliver. Stepping back, jumper 5. J.D. Davison, got it. Nice feed inside. Bediako play. Boy, the timing on that. Bediako jam. Followed by Keon Ellis. Alabama's turning it into a run. Puts it up off the glass. No. Wow, to himself. Breakaway. Big guy going to the line. To the rim, high off the glass and in. Huge play. Javon Quinterly down. Spinning, shooting, scoring over Jalen Williams. What a play. Take a deep breath. Bama hangs on. Tide wins it here in Tuscaloosa.
Tide, so I don't know who wouldn't have Noah and Derek.
He got the loud one. Bring it on.
Tide TV This Week is presented by the University of Alabama, where legends are made. Ford, for great offers on F-150, see your local Ford dealer. Proud sponsor of the Crimson Tide.
Really an indication of how far this Alabama team has come under NATO.
Here comes Bama to Shaq again. Makes it again. Roll Tide rolls exactly doing that. JD going to the rack. Oh, mercy. Threw it home. And what opportunity. Three now penetrates. Oh, what a shot with the left hand. With the dunk.
Welcome back to Tide TV this week. For the second week in a row, Alabama had a midweek contest against a team from the Magnolia State.
This time it was against the Mississippi State Bulldogs. A win would make it 3 wins in a row for the Tide. Alabama led by 4 at the half, 34-30. Things began to heat up in the second half. Trayvon Diggs led the Tide in the opening 5 minutes, putting up 9 of Alabama's opening 13 points to begin the final 20 minutes of play. The Bulldogs then countered with a 12-2 run to take a 64-57 advantage for their first lead of the second half.
Head coach Nate Oates didn't exactly agree with some of the calls and also expressed his concerns to the officials. They quickly responded with a couple of technical fouls. The second technical foul sent Coach Oates to the locker room for the rest of the game. Alabama trailing by 7. The Crimson Tide went on to an 18-2 run to take a 9-point lead at 75-66. The Bulldogs made a late push, but the Tide held on for the 5-point win, 80-75.
You guys answered the bell. I screwed up, didn't handle the referees the way I should have, got tossed. I thought the staff did a great job. Charlie, Petway, and Brian kind of came together and got the guys rallied together. I think they scored the first 2 times. I was watching it from the training room, but they hit the free throws. They scored the first 2, and then we went on an 18-2 run. So thought their energy picked up. They played hard. Staff did a great job.
Crimson Tide had 4 players score in double figures, led by Trayvon Diggs with 21. JQ also had 8 assists and a pair of rebounds and blocks. Charles Bediako scored a career-high 15 points as he was 6 of 7 from the floor with 6 dunks. Bediako also had 6 blocks to match his season high.
And Darius Miles and Jaden Shackelford also finished in double figures. Shaq had 12 points and 8 rebounds, while Miles scored 12 with 7 boards. And with that win, the Crimson Tide improved to 17-9 overall and 7-6 in the SEC.
Let's take an all-access look at the highlights from the Tide's win over the Bulldogs.
I'm with y'all every day. I know what we got. I want y'all to be great. All right? Go be great tonight. This is why you work.
Lob pass down low. Bediako the flush with a nice feed. Twitter steps up. 3, bottom. Why not get it inside again? And that's Noah Gurley. Quarter Miles. Spots up. 3-ball bottom. What a block by Bediako. Behind the back. Shackelford. Behind the back to the trailer. Shaq for the layup. Bediako runs the floor. The confidence of Quinterly. Shaq. No look. Bediako the slam. And Alabama forces State to use a timeout. 3, bottom. Davison follows and he's fouled. Bama comes the other way. Here comes the Tide to Miles to the rack. The flood. And Bama wins it 80-75. Crimson Tide with a victory. Had to fight to do it.
Somebody made some big time plays. They didn't score. They hit the 2 free throws and they didn't score for a long time. Like you guys stepped up, and so where's the hard hat? Give me that. Look, yeah. Listen, 6 blocks. Freaking.
Tide TV This Week is presented by the University of Alabama, where legends are made. Ford, for great offers on F-150, see your local Ford dealer. Proud sponsor of the Crimson Tide.
Really an indication of how far this Alabama team has come under Nate Oates.
Here comes Bama to Shaq again. Makes it again. Roll Tide rolls, exactly doing that. JD going to the rack. Oh, mercy. Threw it home. And what opportunity. Three now penetrates. Oh, what a shot with the left hand. With the dunk.
Welcome back to Tide TV This Week. I'm Roger Hoover, joined by my co-host Kira Goldstein.
This past Sunday was Super Bowl Sunday. Super Bowl 56 featured the Los Angeles Rams against the Cincinnati Bengals. And as you would expect, Roger, both sides had several Alabama players. And what a Super Bowl it was.
Yeah, the LA Rams scored a last-minute touchdown in the 4th quarter for the win, and a former Crimson Tide player had a big hand in that victory. Former defensive lineman A'Shawn Robinson was a force up front for the Rams defense the entire game. Robinson finished the game with 6 tackles and a sack. That sack happened to come against another former Alabama lineman. Robinson beat the Bengals offensive lineman Jonah Williams to sack quarterback Joe Burrow.
Joining Robinson on the Rams' active roster was linebacker Terrell Lewis, with long snapper Carson Tinker representing the Tide on the Rams' practice squad. In all, 32 former Crimson Tide players have been on the active roster of the Super Bowl winning teams.
It really was a great year for the Crimson Tide in the NFL, and we also saw several rookies. They had an impact in the league as well, with a lot of veterans having success. I mean, just all over the place. Alabama football, SEC, you could talk about a lot of Crimson Tide success stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if we just jump back and look at like playoff picture, right? You got rookie Mac Jones leading his team to postseason, showing he can lead a team. You got Heisman winner Devontae Smith breaking the rookie receiving record. Then you got the other Heisman winner, King Henry, arguably the best running back in the game.
I don't think there's an argument.
I don't think there's an argument. He is the best. He is the best. Who was hurt for half the season and still led the NFL in rushing, which is just so unbelievably impressive. And you got Najee Harris, who broke the Steelers' rushing record. I mean, as a rookie, it's just so impressive, and I think it really speaks to like how insane this program is. Like, the strength of Alabama is unmatched.
And don't forget as well, I'm not even a Cowboys fan, I got to bring up Trayvon Diggs leading the league with 11 interceptions this year. So again, great performances by the Crimson Tide in the NFL all season long.
Yeah.
We also told you a couple weeks ago about 3 new additions to the football coaching staff, and this past week, Coach Saban made it official as he added the 4th new assistant to this coaching staff. Joe Cox is the newest assistant coach for the Crimson Tide. He will coach tight ends for Alabama. Cox spent last season coaching tight ends for his hometown, Charlotte 49ers. Before that, Cox spent the 2020 season coaching wide receivers on Will Muschamp's staff at South Carolina. And you'll be able to see the new assistant coaches and the 2022 version of the Crimson Tide in action at Bryant-Denny Stadium on A-Day. It was announced this week that this year's Golden Flake A-Day game will take place on April 16th. Former players Wilbur Jackson and John Mitchell will be honored.
In 1970, Jackson made history by becoming the first African-American scholarship student athlete on the Crimson Tide football team. And a year later, Mitchell cemented himself in the record books as the first African-American player to play in a varsity football game for Alabama. It's very inspiring. So spring practice will get underway in a little over a month, and we're about 2 months away from A-Day. I really can't wait, Roger. It seems like football season just ended, which it did, but it's good that we have spring practice and A-Day coming up to help us cope until fall.
Well, the wait is over for Alabama softball fans. The Crimson Tide opened their season in Arizona this past weekend at the Candrea Classic. Alabama played 4 games, won them all, including 2 5-inning run rule victories.
Alabama opened the season with an 11-0 5-inning run rule victory over Southern Utah. The Tide played 2 on Saturday, and in Game 1, Alabama defeated Oregon State 5-1 and followed that up with an impressive 11-0 5-inning run rule win over 9th-ranked Arizona. The Tide completed the 4-game sweep with the 8-3 win over New Mexico on Sunday. Wow, Roger, I mean, what a way to start the season for the 2nd-ranked Tide. Coach Murphy's squad outscored their opponents 35-4.
That's pretty good. Alabama hit 10 home runs in that tournament. That ties the record for most in an opening weekend in program history. It's also the first time the Tide did it in just 4 games. Previous record was 5 back in 2011.
First of all, the weather was terrific. It was 70 and sunny all 3 days. And obviously in Arizona, the air is a little bit lighter than here. And man, it just seemed like every ball that we hit was right on the barrel. We were on time, and it was going in a gap or over the fence. It was really fun to watch.
This weekend, the Tide host the Easton Bama Bash. Alabama will play 5 games over 3 days, including 1 against Evansville and 2 each against Virginia Tech and Middle Tennessee.
It's going to be a busy weekend here at the Capstone. The Alabama baseball team opens their season here at home this weekend as well. Alabama welcomes Xavier for a 3-game series beginning on Friday. Let's hear from the Tide as they open the 2022 season this weekend at the Joe.
Well, I'm as excited as I've ever been. I feel like I say that every year, but love this group. It's the best group we've had since I've been here. You know, we took over a team in 2018 that had a lot of experience, but we were short in some areas, and kind of feel like we've been playing catch up every year since then. And this year we've got some really good pieces, and we have some experience. So really excited to get going. Strong intangibles with the group. Really believe in our team, and I can't wait to see what it looks like on Friday.
Straightaway to center. Diggs, and look out downtown. Gone.
Throw there is not in time, and Alabama is a winner. Both teams had a chance to celebrate today, but it's Bama's that counts.
They're headed to the Women's College World Series.
And the Alabama Crimson Tide are your SEC champions for the 6th time with a record-breaking run at the Rhodes House. And a perfect present for Montana Fouts and Alabama at the Women's College World Series.
Welcome back. After picking up a thrilling overtime win on the road against Vanderbilt, the Alabama women's basketball team returned to Coleman Coliseum Sunday to host the Kentucky Wildcats.
The Tide held their annual Power of Pink game and play for K event in that match against the Wildcats. Alabama took an 11-2 lead in the first 4 minutes on 5 of 7 shooting from the field, but Kentucky closed out the first period on a 13-5 run as the Tide led by 1 after the first 8 minutes, 20-19. The Tide was low scoring as the Wildcats outscored the Tide 10-8 for a 1-point lead at the half, 29-28.
Alabama and Kentucky scored 16 apiece in the third to give the Wildcats the 1-point advantage going into the final period. The lead went back and forth throughout the final 8 minutes of play. Alabama led by 1 with just under 3 minutes left, but the Wildcats retook the lead. The Tide had a couple of chances to tie the game to take the lead down the stretch, but the Wildcats held on in the end as Kentucky defeated Alabama 67-63. Despite out-rebounding and out-shooting the Wildcats, the 18 turnovers were just too much to overcome. Kentucky scored 18 points on those 18 turnovers as they defeated Alabama by just 4 points.
Megan Abrams led the Tide in scoring for the 9th time this season with 21 points as she connected on all 6 of her free throw attempts to go along with 4 rebounds and a steal. Jemiah Mingo-Young finished with her 4th double-double of the year as she had 16 points and 10 rebounds. There's only 2 weeks left in the regular season for the Alabama women's basketball team before the SEC tournament tips off on March 2nd in Nashville, Tennessee.
You know, it was a special night this Friday night in Coleman Coliseum. The 8th-ranked Crimson Tide welcomed the 30th-ranked Georgia Bulldogs for their 18th Power of Pink meet in gymnastics. Shalyn Olsen landed a 9-9 in the leadoff spot on the vault for the 3rd meet in a row to lead the Crimson Tide to a 49-250. Alabama followed it up with a 49-5 on the uneven bars, led by Luisa Blanco with a 9-9-5-0. Lily Hudson took top honors on the floor exercise with a 5.950, leading the Tide to a 49-500. Alabama totaled 49-225 in the balance team, with Olsen scoring a career-best 9-9 to lead the way as the Crimson Tide defeated the Georgia Bulldogs 197-475 to 196-800.
On all 4 events, every leadoff did their job. And the goal is to maintain that momentum and kind of get on the train and get rolling. But then when you have a dip, next second's more important. And we did that a lot tonight, and that will make us stronger.
Lily Hudson was named SEC Freshman of the Week. Hudson earned a trio of top 3 finishes in the win over Georgia, winning the floor exercise with a 9.95, matching her career best. Hudson also scored a career best 9.9 on the uneven bars, along with a 9.875 on the balance beam.
The Alabama women's tennis team has gotten off to a hot start to begin the spring. Crimson Tide remained undefeated after a couple of matches this past weekend, and head coach Jenny Mines reached a historic milestone as head coach of the Crimson Tide.
This past Friday night in Tuscaloosa, the Alabama women's tennis team took down Houston 6-1. Alabama picked up the doubles win and then won 5 of 6 singles matches for the 6-1 victory.
On Sunday, Alabama picked up their 7th win of the season as the Hot Tide handed TCU just their 2nd loss of the season. After picking up the doubles point once again, Alabama picked up 3 quick wins in singles to shut out TCU 4-0.
And with that victory over the Horned Frogs, Alabama improved to 7-0, and it was also the 300th win for Jenny Mines as head coach of the Crimson Tide. A big congratulations to Coach Mines and the Alabama women's tennis team on that unbelievable accomplishment. The Tide will be home again this weekend as Jenny Mines' squad hosts Memphis on Friday and Minnesota on Sunday.
The Alabama men's tennis team dropped a couple of matches on the road in Oklahoma this past weekend, but the Tide did earn some recognition from the Southeastern Conference this week. Men's tennis lost to 19th-ranked Oklahoma 6-1, lost close 4-3 decision to Tulsa. However, Enzo Aguiar was selected as the SEC Men's Tennis Freshman of the Week. He played at the number 2 spot, recorded a pair of singles wins against nationally ranked players in Addison, in addition to adding a win in doubles play.
A big weekend for the freshmen. Enzo and the Alabama men's tennis team will be back in action next weekend in Montgomery for the Blue-Gray National Tennis Classic.
Stay with us. We'll have our plays and players of the week coming up next in just 90 seconds.
It's a done deal. 995. It's in. Alabama, the 2021 SEC champions.
I'm so proud of them. They have worked so hard. They have been fighters.
For Louisa, it's about locking in the landing. Putt in. Easy job.
And that follows up Cam Machado's 9-7 for Lily Hudson in Alabama.
Ellis, the lob, Beniaco, the flood, Bama finding the big man who's doing a great job. Back to Note. Note poked away by Shaq, scramble, Rojas with the steal. Rojas to the rack, laid it up, counted. On the drive, losing it was Arkansas' Zamude, Bama the other way. JD, nice dish, Gurley the lay-in for 2, and Alabama puts the lead at 10. JQ changing directions, hesitates, bounce pass inside Gurley, nearly walked, saved it, shot it, scored it. 2 huge buckets from Noah Gurley over Jalen Williams in the last minute and a half. And Bama leads by 1 with 23 seconds to go. Shoe going down the lane, throws a lot. Beniaco to finish. Boy, JQ is playing at a high level. And to get into the lane, does nice bounce pass. Beniaco to flood. Wow, what a feed and what a finish from Charles Beniaco.
Welcome back to Tide TV This Week. Those were our plays of the week brought to you by ATI. Now let's take a look at our players of the week brought to you by Legacy of Hope. J.D. Davison averaged 14.5 points, 7 rebounds, and 6 assists in wins over Ole Miss and Arkansas. Davison led the Tide in scoring with 11 and recorded 4 rebounds and 4 assists in Alabama's win over Arkansas.
In the win over Georgia, Luisa Blanco captured the all-around title with a score of 39,500. Blanco also won the individual title on the uneven bars with a 9.950 and matched her season-best score on the floor exercise with a 9.9.
Freshman Megan Bloodworth led the Alabama softball team as she batted .600 over the 4 games at the Candria Classic, including 3 home runs, a triple, and 7 RBIs. In her first ever at-bat for the Crimson Tide, Bloodworth crushed a grand slam. What a debut for the freshman.
And we have a couple of school records from track and field in just his second collegiate 3,000 meters. Hillary Chariot became the first Alabama man to run under 7.50, breaking the legendary David Kamani's school record with a 7:48.74 at the Music City Challenge in Nashville.
In Boston, Massachusetts, at the David Henry Valentine Invitational, Mercy Chalenga shattered her own school record in the 3,000 meters, dropping nearly 10 seconds off her previous mark with a time of 8:53.16, which ranks her 4th nationally this season.
Back in Nashville, Ulid Kipsang broke his own school record in the mile with a time of 3:54.36 in the Music City Challenge. His time ranks him 3rd nationally in the mile. And those were our players of the week, brought to you by Legacy of Hope.
Tune in next week as we bring you more on the Crimson Tide and all-access content of the Tide you can't get anywhere else.
We'll see you next week, everyone. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
This has been a presentation from Learfield.